Hey there, listeners. This episode was recorded before the COVID-19 pandemic. If you're stuck at home, as we now are, we're glad we can keep you company. Stay safe.
Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
Welcome to Word Docs. You've just got me because the other two are eating chocolate again. We're lucky there's no Moscato or they'd never speak.
Well, we'd speak, but we'd not make much sense.
There's nothing wrong with Moscato. Anyone who's listening...
It's about to be the next hot drink,
It's about to be the next hot drink.
Back.
Take yourself to the bottle-o.
The sugar brigade here.
The bottle-o lady.
Sugar addict.
She judges me. I said, I got 2 bottles of Moscato because it was 2 for 1, special deal. And she said...
Thrifty.
Yeah, I'm nothing if not thrifty. I said to her, people judge me for this. And she was deadpan, looked at me with these nasty eyes and said...
Nasty.
People should.
Oh, well, can I just name drop and say I had an absolutely sublime Moscato at my friend Brian Castro's house the other night. And it was really, really
and
super.
Moscato dropping.
Yeah.
Oh, it was wonderful. In fact, I meant to take a photo of the label.
Pitch Brian as a Moscato drinker.
Oh, he's a big rosé drinker too.
I would
So
have
we
picked red wine.
bonded over rosé.
A lot of people
he also
out
drinks
there
red wine.
who are secret Moscato drinkers.
That was
don't feel any shame at
that
all.
was Dr. Alex Vickery Howe on the Moscato and Dr. Sean Williams name dropping. And I'm Dr. Matthews. I don't really like Moscato.
Or name dropping.
No, I could name drop if you want.
Well, you name dropped Nora Roberts recently.
And I have name dropped Nora Roberts and Gracie. I can't really compete with Star Wars or the Queen.
I second-hand name drop. People I haven't met, but that friends of mine have met.
My friend met Emma Thompson,
Yeah.
and then there's the Queen.
Yeah.
But you can't name drop the Queen unless you've actually met her.
In
We can talk
dreams.
about the Queen.
He's met her in his dreams.
Of course.
Earlier
yes,
we did mention a stalker.
We did.
I'm going to leave that. Leave that open.
E2R
The Queen
initials.
stalking.
Yeah. What are we talking about this week?
Characters.
Which I think we have with a good start here.
I
'Cause
think
what
we
you
all
have
are.
is what kind of a character would drink Moscato, do you think?
Well,
A strong masculine character with a
masculine.
chiseled jaw, strong
and a
upper
Queen
body strength,
obsession.
strong upper
hairy
body
or hairless
strength.
chest.
Yeah, muscular forearms
Excellent
and
quiff.
thighs.
And a man who loves the cold.
You're describing
is a
me
cold
perfectly,
weather
actually. You'd be surprised how much cold wine is down in Antarctica because people
easy.
like their wine. They like their cold wine. It's fantastic. Anyway, characters.
Characters.
Who are they? Where do they come from? How do we find names for them? What do we like about
love
them?
naming.
We're all
I
name
love
obsessed.
naming.
Oh, name it,
No,
that's
we're going to
right.
hit this.
I love
I have a
names
book of
so
names
much.
by my bed,
I've got
and
3.
my mother thought I'd gotten someone pregnant.
Anyone in particular, or just someone? Some
that
random
was
someone.
the worry. That was the worry.
I like that she thinks so much of you that you're naming the baby. You're not like freaking out like I'm not raising a child. You're like, what name should I
I
give it?
dread having to name a baby. That'll be like serious.
Oh, do you know what was hard when we did it? Was we had this rule that if one person said no, you couldn't bring it up again. There was no fighting over a name.
Wow.
And so all my best names were gone. No.
No Conan, no.
Vetoed the baby's name.
Wow.
So naming is obviously for all of it. Now here we go.
Oh,
Why?
I love
Why?
naming.
Why?
Why is it so important? Because they are
are
our
their
children?
name.
Question mark. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if they are our children, but I think it's so important.
I think
Okay.
a name
In a
you
similar
get
way.
so much from somebody's name.
Have you ever? Now this is how weird I am. This is a huge confession. I have a document that is labelled character roll call in a file of mine.
Roll call.
Character roll call, like a roll
Yeah.
call. And if I'm naming, this is how weird I am. If I'm naming a new character, I will go to that document, make sure I'm not repeating a name, and make sure that the name is not too similar to something I've used previously.
I do
but the
do
longer
that.
you go on,
It gets
It
harder.
gets harder.
Harder it
Believe
gets.
me, it
I
gets
have a
harder.
few
and
names.
eventually you sort of have to make
I
compromises.
have a few names for secondary characters that pop up again and again.
I have a
don't know
guy
why.
called Harry Barkus in all of my plays. Harry
Really?
Barkus
Oh.
is mentioned.
There you go.
He's never actually, I think the next thing I write, Harry Barkus has got to be in it,
And then you've got to kill him off.
Yeah.
and you've got to kill him off. But he's
Maybe
been
he should
involved in
just
a lot.
never
He's in
appear.
a lot of shit. Harry's around.
Episode title, Where's Harry?
Where's Harry? And I'm not on Facebook, but I
appeared.
might
He's
come
appeared.
under
I'd
Harry
already written
Barkus.
Secret Moscato Drinker as the episode title. But,
Harry is a secret
where's
Moscato
Harry?
drinker
Oh,
for
yeah.
sure.
I don't know where it came from. I don't know where the name came from. I don't know why. It started in the first thing I wrote years and years ago, and he just keeps coming up.
Do you think you were Harry Barkus in a previous life?
Possibly.
Possibly. Well.
You're right.
But eventually you have to make compromises. You can't keep, eventually you have to say, I can write two things that have a guy called Jack in them and the universe will not implode. But it does, by having that file there, it does help you to think about it more than you otherwise would have. And it can waste time, I'm not going to lie.
Oh, you can spend days on the right
it can
character
waste
name.
time.
Alex and I actually have been working on a couple of projects and we have spent whole days just going through name books.
Going through names, and it's fun. It can get obsessive, and it's why is it so important? Because it points to their character, because you want them to be individual in your mind, so
They
you can
can't
write for them.
exist until they're named, I think.
They can't exist until
I
they're
don't have
named.
them until they've got a name.
And then you can change it. So in the book that
I
I've just
don't
been
know that
editing,
I
I've changed the female lead 3 times.
Oh, so from what to what to what?
From Lynn to Greta to Etta.
They're very different.
They're very different, and
I like Etta.
Etta,
Good
and
name.
short for regret, and that informs her character. So she is the youngest of 12 sisters, born to a father who always wanted a boy, and eventually died of disappointment. So all the girls' names like melancholy and regret, and so he's a horrible man.
It's like Puritans. I remember reading. I loved. There's a name in the US for Puritan, a name Thankful. I love that name for some
Thankful.
reason. I would never
Thankful.
call anyone that.
Chop the wood.
It's like, I always think chastity is a very mean name to give someone.
Oh yeah, because that's guaranteeing.
Either way.
Yeah,
Either way is not
an
good, is it?
unhappy
Yeah.
life. I think is what it guarantees.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm always looking for a meaning to the name. So I often go to things like the Bible or to Old English dictionaries, or I've got a wonderful book called All About Deities and Demigods. It's not the D&D one, but it's a history of all obscure gods and things like that. So I'm always digging for extra layers of meaning in the name that nobody else might ever notice.
Yeah.
But I will. Do you do that kind of stuff as well?
Sometimes. It depends on the character. I will tell you a funny story. I have both a Sean and an Alex.
Oh.
And they're fantastic.
Well, Alex.
Are they gay lovers or anything like that?
Alex is the
gay Moscato
heroine.
drinkers.
She's the heroine of Bound for Eden, and she dresses as a boy for the whole thing.
As do
Also
I.
loves
Uncanny.
Moscato, I'm sure. But Sean is in an unpublished book, and he's a younger brother of a character, and he has a tragic death.
Oh,
It's very
man.
sad.
I was reading.
Wow.
He's also got magic powers, though.
there
He
you
can
go.
set things on fire.
I was reading Maggie Stiefvater's Scorpio Races while on tour with Maggie Stiefvater, and I confessed to her how much I was loving the book and loving the fact that the main romantic lead was called Sean, and she said she always thought Sean was a good
I like the
romantic
name
lead
Sean.
name, and I thought,
So,
It's a
well,
good
there
name.
you go.
Alex
There
is a
you
good
go.
name, too.
Oh, well, there you go. Amy's also a good name.
Have you ever written an Amy? There's a challenge.
Have I ever written an Amy?
Someone very tall.
I think I will write a tall Amy. I think a character
brunette.
called Tall Amy. Tall Amy.
Tall Amy.
I'm going to do a search on
She's
Dropbox.
too
I'm
tall
sure
now,
I've
isn't
done
she?
one.
She's like some freakish giant now,
Yes,
right?
Tall Amy.
Yeah.
Tall Amy's quite dangerous.
Yeah.
Or I could have two characters called Amy and Matthew. Or two Matthews. You have to have two Matthews, and it's Amy and Matthew.
What was your middle name? Tiberius or something?
Tiberius.
Yeah.
I did have a lovely friend, Victoria Perman, who wrote a book that was published last year, and the heroine's name is Tess after me, which I thought was very sweet.
But what happens if you like
wonderful.
someone's name but it has no significance beyond that? Because I've named characters, like I meet someone with a cool name.
Yeah, I've
And I
done
go,
that.
oh, I might use that. Then I
Yeah.
think, it seems like I'm...
I find boys' names hard because there's so few of them really compared to girls' names. Like there's so many girls' names out there, but there's a lot of just simple boys' names. Unless you go really wacky.
Problem with girls' names is you don't want to like fall into everyone being called Lucy, Millie, like all the Y names or
Yeah.
all the A names. You want to try and mix
Like
it
Amy.
up. Yeah, Amy,
Yeah.
Millie, Molly.
Oh, there you
know.
go. I found an Amy in my oeuvre. So a
you go.
script called Afterlife, which was longlisted for a Writers Guild Award, has a
you
secondary
go.
character called Amy.
So it's
there
only
you
you,
go.
Alex.
I
Do
don't
you
know,
get
but
I've
two
definitely done
Amy
Alex's.
Tall Amy.
I've definitely done Alex's. So
Have you done Sean's?
No, I don't think I've got an Amy
I
or a
do,
Sean.
Tom.
This is all going to
I love
happen.
producer Tom. Book 3 of my romance series, the hero's name is Tom.
oh, there you go.
I've got a
Tom's looking pretty
had a few
pleased about that.
Toms,
A wonderful
yeah.
producer,
Yeah.
Tom Young. His life now has meaning.
Yeah.
Apart from
I
producing a
have
podcast.
Tom the Paperboy in something I've written.
Tom the
Tom the
Paperboy.
Paperboy, who's quite traumatized.
Oh, traumatised Tom.
He appears in. It probably would never, even if that book happens, it'll probably never actually get through The Keeper, but there's just this random scene where Tom the Paperboy witnesses something horrific, and it kind of goes down this little rabbit hole of what happened to Tom. And the editor I was working with went, "What's this thing about Tom the Paperboy? You just
Either take it somewhere or take it out.
either take him out."
Do you have, but on that, so Tom the Paperboy can be the phenomenon, okay? We're naming it
Tom
Tom
the
the Paperboy
Paperboy
phenomenon.
phenomenon.
Is when you get a character who just takes the hell over. They come on and they're not supposed to be like taking up much space, and they just take over
and
the
you
whole
keep going
thing.
back to them,
And they just, when they're on the page, they're so alive, they run away with everything.
Yes.
So Tom the Paperboy.
Yeah, Tom. Well, Tom. Yeah, I've rewrote an unpublished or unperformed sci-fi with a character called Genji Hong, who's this Chinese girl, and she's got nothing to do with anything, but I keep going back to her because she's badass. And I got a script assessment back that went, didn't love the overall thing. It's a bit derivative, not a massive fan, but I'm obsessed with this character, and I feel like writing back and going, me too. And maybe the lesson is
Follow that.
follow her. But it's
Impossible
weird.
Music, my latest book, Simon Rain, the main character, ended up being the only thing I was interested in the novel that I originally sold
Yeah.
some years earlier. So I ditched everything else about the complete scenario
just kept him.
Simon.
Kept him.
Because he was much more interesting in our life.
I have this character in my latest book, Bound for Glory. He's actually the hero's dad, and he's an Arapaho chief, and he's just really funny. He's obsessed with marrying his son off and is like this crazy old matchmaker. And he just runs away with the last third of the book. And it's funny because when my publisher, she actually tweeted it. She said she just read it, and she's like, and I'm totally obsessed with his dad. And I was like,
Spin-off.
me too. And then readers have started posting that in reviews on Goodreads that they just think he's just the best guy. It's like, I don't know where he came from, but he's just took over the book.
Have you ever written a character who is not, this is going to make me sound weirder than I normally do. I haven't been doing the weird thing for a while. Was weird my catchword? Was it? That was
It
what
was
was
for
my
like
catchword.
2 episodes.
Two
and then
episodes.
you dropped
then
it.
it stopped being
Fickle.
a thing.
You're trying to make it a thing again.
I'm trying to make it a thing. It's like fetch. It's not going to happen. But have you ever written a character who has a specific purpose, and you're like, I'm writing this character for this reason. They're going to do this thing, and I'm going to sound quite mad. In the writing process, they stop doing what they're supposed to do.
Oh, it happens all the time.
And suddenly you go, that character has derailed my work.
Everything. Yeah, everything.
I wrote a play that's been shortlisted for a few things. I haven't actually performed it yet, but I think I will. Not me personally, but put it out there. That was supposed to be about quite a good moral person in a kind of dark situation, and she was supposed to really be the one that would pull through this and make this okay. And halfway through, I think I suddenly went, she's a monster. She's a monster, and this story's not going to be what I set it out to be. And I wrote that in the writer's notes for it, and people who've read it went, that's the kind of cool thing about it is you think that she is going to be the fine, upstanding citizen, but she's actually completely swept up in this story. What is that when a character does that? Because that speaks to the line between author and character in a weird way.
I think you're still the author of that character, but I think it's the story becoming that much more alive and better when characters start to suggest possibilities that you couldn't foresee.
Yeah, I
going
think it's
in.
complexity. I think you've created a character with enough complexity that they develop, and that they have a logic that when you start out, it's not that developed, right?
And I found myself trying to write the original ending that I had and
you
going,
know.
she's not going to
That
let
never
me.
works.
She's not going to let me.
And don't you know when it's wrong? When
Yeah.
it feels
Yeah.
forced. You
Yeah.
just completely know.
Yeah, and so you suddenly find yourself fighting with the fictitious person,
Yeah.
going, why won't you do what you were designed to do? And she goes, nah, I'm going to do something else.
But I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because like Nabokov was the opposite. He said, my characters are galley slaves. Like, of course they don't run away with it. They have to do whatever I tell them to do. But I've never been able to do that. My characters just run off.
Well, either he was creating perfect characters that need to change through the writing process, which may be the case because he was Nabokov, but or he was an idiot for not following his instincts, or
Nabokov
maybe he didn't
was
have
an idiot. Sean Williams.
That's another T-shirt.
Yeah.
Or maybe he just didn't like being spontaneous or was happy with his
Very
instincts as they
controlled.
were? He was very
Well, it's funny
controlled.
because I
you know.
was at, I don't think you should mind me saying this, Heather Taylor Johnson, who's
the wonderful Heather Taylor
wonderful
Johnson.
author, who's
beautiful
published,
poet.
yeah, a beautiful poet, and published here in Australia and in the US. And she once gave a seminar I was at where she asked, in all seriousness, about metaphors, because she said that for her she's spent a lot of time and effort on them, and they're very crafted and controlled. And she just looked up, I've never forgotten it. She looked up and she said, "Are your metaphors natural to the whole room?" And no one knew quite what to say because you have to think about it, right? And for me, I don't craft any of that stuff. It just happens. But I think we talked about this like weeks ago about intuitive versus like what kind of writer you are, because I'm a very intuitive writer, and maybe that's Nabokov was not an intuitive writer. He was a very crafted.
well crafted, well planned,
Yeah.
organised,
And his
methodical
metaphors
brain.
might not be natural; they might be planned. Natural's probably the wrong word, but you know what I
Spontaneous,
mean.
I suppose,
like
yeah.
organic versus crafted.
It's hard to tell when you're looking at a finished work what came naturally to the author
No.
and what they slaved over for hours. I mean, I know, and I'm sure it's the same for you, but by the time the book has come out, there's some of the original draft left that was there spontaneously, but there are sections that might have been very finely honed over many drafts in order to work. And you can see that kind of multi-dimensional layering in the text, but nobody else apart from
Nobody
your
else
editor
would,
maybe.
would see it, yeah, except for an
Hopefully.
editor.
Hopefully, that's right.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do get a sense when you're reading something that's been published and going, oh, I can start to see the cogs here. Maybe the Frankensteinian
Yeah.
scenes as well.
Something
but
that's interesting
pretty rare.
about character that I've been thinking about a lot these last few years as I teach, because, you know, when you're teaching basic craft, particularly at first year level, we think about character, setting, plot, like all those kinds of building blocks. But for me, setting or environment comes first. Like, I've realised this over the years that it's almost impossible to say create a character without thinking about where they are first, because characters are so, and we are too, such products of our time and place. And Hemingway said that you can't lift a character out of their context. That if you're going to create a character set from the 1950s in, I don't know, Brooklyn, you can't then lift that person up and put them in, 19th century London. It just wouldn't work. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately, about how characters are so driven by where they come from.
And how they change too. That's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. I mean, you craft a character at the beginning of a story. By the end of the story, they have to have changed, or else they're not a protagonist. And what your character becomes depends on the conflict that's in the story and the characters around them. So it becomes very difficult to keep a handle on who the character is. And I think that's why they tend to appear to get out of our control.
Yeah.
During the course of writing something, because a book has so many dimensions in the mathematical sense, that it just takes one to go in a direction you didn't see before the character itself is evolving in a way that you might not be able to take back. Sometimes you can roll back to a previous version, like an operating system, but sometimes you can't because it's just that much more interesting.
Yeah, and you just go, where am I going now?
Yeah, how exciting.
I've got
yeah.
questions for both of you.
Oh.
So can you remind me to come back to the one for Sean? But I want to start with Alex.
Depends how horrible the one is for
Yeah,
Alex
exactly.
and whether
Yeah,
I'll
these-
remember
these
it.
are- these are
I'll just
tense-
eat some chocolate. This is me
The
rustling in
rustling.
the chocolate packet.
Tense
Yum,
individual
yum, yum.
questions.
No, so because I've been thinking also about how creating characters, like writers have to be have a lot of the same skills weirdly enough as actors, even though we never perform it. And you trained as an actor as well as being a writer.
Allegedly, yeah.
And I was wondering the similarities between creating a character as an actor, as a writer, versus and what's different and what's the same, and how do you think training as an actor might have helped you create character?
I nearly mentioned this previously on one of the other apps.
Apps, like we're professionals.
Like we're
now.
professionals, yeah. Is that we've got apps? Is that sometimes I do get up and act things out?
Oh, it's so important to act things out,
Yeah.
particularly action scenes.
Yeah. I love that image now.
I have never done that.
Oh,
Sean
you
with a
absolutely
lightsaber
should.
in his own loft.
Oh, I
That's
have
too,
done that actually.
That's too good.
Yeah, you have to, particularly if it's in like,
All right, I need a support pony to play a cowboy.
that'd be Alex. He's more cowboy mature. I could be an actual special pony in one of your westerns because I'm round enough
I'm
to.
totally having a horse called Sean now. What's happening?
I love it.
But
I'm
I
so
think
excited.
actors are taught to think psychologically from the
Yeah.
inner to the
'Cause that's
outer,
what I do.
and that's
Yeah.
what writers are doing. What can be very interesting when you're working on a play is when you actually meet that actor who's doing the same thing you are, but they're doing it from an acting point of view. You're
Yeah.
doing it from a writing point of view, and so you get into these really in-depth like things that are not in the text necessarily, but you go, where were you? What were you thinking? Where is this person coming from? And really good actors you work with will write backstories that are not in the text. And
Do they match what you've been
and they
thinking?
may or may not. One actor said to me once, he goes, "This guy's gay," and I went, "That's not in the story." He goes, "Yeah, you won't know, but I know." And I went,
I love that.
That's kind of awesome. But
like Dumbledore.
like Dumbledore, yeah. Well, there's some issues with that, but one of I think it was Professor Julie Hollidge, who was a teacher at Flinders. I think it was her, or maybe it was another teacher of mine, but said, go through a day in the life of this person from breakfast to dinner.
Wow.
What are they doing on the average day? And so I do think about that now when I'm writing a character. What breakfast cereal? What do they think about their family? How do they sleep? Where do they sleep?
Oh, yeah. So in writing, like, they talk about making sure you see the ordinary world, like some kind of glimpse of the ordinary world.
mundane.
Yeah, think about what's the last meal they ate, or when was the last time they changed their shirt.
Chocolate
or
Moscato,
that
guys.
kind of stuff.
Chocolate Moscato.
and Moscato.
And those details
Oh,
then sort of start this trail into, are they confident? Are they anxious? Are they high status? Are they low status? The one I love is, are they past, present or future thinkers? Because I love
Oh,
this.
I've never thought
I
of
had
that.
a dear friend who was a past thinker and would constantly reminisce, take you back to high school, remember when. And I'd find myself saying, what are we doing right now? Let's
What
just,
am I? Like, if you were to think of me as a person,
you're a planner, I would say, probably.
right,
So
future
future
thinker.
person.
Yeah, well, see, most villains, and I'm not putting you in this box,
most villains
but most
were-
villains are,
that was a lovely
are
little
future,
line there.
sorry, awful segue, but are future thinkers.
I'd like to be a villain.
I will
It's all
take
Amy.
over Metropolis, right? I will
then the
build a
heroes
Death Star.
react in
And
the
the hero is
present.
constantly reactive. And the best villains are so far ahead that they don't actually realise things are going wrong for them till the last moment. And that's
this
why a
is totally
villain
me.
is a supremely confident. If we go back to the Emperor from Star Wars, right? He's not even going to bother getting off that chair because as far as he's concerned, he's planned so far ahead. He's got,
Everything is happening just as I foresee.
this is his thing, right? So he's got an entire legion on Endor waiting. He's got
Yes.
the battle stations operational. He doesn't bother getting off the chair until things get quite dire. And at that point goes,
And he's caught up to the present.
oh shit, I better get up. Actually, you know what? There's a Jedi in the room. But it takes him a long time to get there. Or Ian McKellen in the X-Men films, complete confidence until the last moment. Whereas a hero is constantly reacting and getting beaten up
And just persisting.
and persisting, and that's why we kind of love them. And then I suppose if you're looking at past thinkers, they tend to be those mentor figures who do live in the past.
Or tragic people.
Or tragic, yeah, absolutely, because they're not able to
Yes.
escape from the past. So I love that. And I actually look at people now and go, are you a past thinker, a future
I've
thinker,
never
or a
thought of that.
present
I
thinker?
love that.
It's very rare, I believe, to meet present thinkers, because I think very few people are. A lot of my Japanese friends, I think, are more present thinkers, and they'll say, we're having a cup of tea now. Not a cup, but we're having a cup of tea. And I'll go, we're going to talk about what we're doing later on today. No, now is
Yeah.
tea. Now is tea. We are just in the moment. Very few people that I know that really think that way.
It's very stoical
I think my
philosophy.
mother is like that. I think my mother lives in the
She's
moment.
in the moment.
Yeah.
But I think I'm a planner. I think you're a planner, Sean. What would you say? What do you think you are?
I don't know, actually. I've been listening to this conversation thinking, am I a victim or a protagonist or a villain, or I don't know.
I don't think you're a victim.
I don't know. It's difficult. I think I've changed. I think I used to be a future thinker. And I don't know, maybe I'm a bit past.
Are
I
you
don't know, it depends
reflective
where I am.
now? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a bit slower and older now. I think I sit back on my laurel and think about my past victories and
Yeah.
Oh.
and put my students to sleep. No, I do not
Can
put
I,
my students to
can I
sleep.
segue? That's a nice segue to my question for you,
Oh,
which
the
is
Sean
about
question.
past victories, and we'll link in with Alex's Star Wars monologue, which is about this idea about about how characters change or not, what it's like them working in someone else's world where you're given these I know you create your own characters too, but you've got certain fixed, rigid things that you can't change.
That's right. And the characters can't change. They, like Princess Leia has to be Princess Leia at the beginning and remain Princess Leia at the end.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. It's a wonderful creative constraint to work within. And for me, the characters I enjoyed writing most in Star Wars were the ones that were very liminal, very grey, had the most capacity for change.
Which is what people love, right? Like with Boba Fett, people love the fact that he's so, you could do anything with him until, you know, they put him in the movie.
Yeah, that's right. And then you couldn't. Or if you put one of your heroes in a situation where you know they could go either way.
Yeah.
So this is why Luke in the old canon is always being tempted to the dark side, because he's interesting when he's being tempted to the dark side. He could go either way. Or Darth Vader might become good, or Princess Leia might make a decision that she has to make for the Republic but is abhorrent as a human being. So there are ways to play with characters that keep them interesting. But in the New Republic books that I wrote with Shane Dix, the characters we loved most and we brought to the centre of those stories were the ones that were were secondary characters in dire straits. And
Which is why people loved Rogue One, right? Because you can bring in these characters and they can really face these difficult, knotty problems and change.
Do you ever get obsessed with minor characters?
Oh, all the time. My minor characters take over, which is one reason I'm moving into more literary fiction again, because my minor characters, my historical books have so many characters. They're just like proliferate. I can't move into a town without 60 characters turning up.
Because I have a pet peeve about... it really annoys me, last Star Wars thing I'm going to bring up, but it really annoys me that no one on the Jedi Council speaks except for Yoda and Mace Windu. Oh, and there's a guy with a big forehead that has like a line or two, but there's 12 of them, right? It's a council. They should be voting on shit. They should be arguing, but an editor may argue, or a script editor or a dramaturg.
Too many people speaking.
And I have this thing where often that may be the feedback of a scene, but I'll go, but I actually do want that texture. I actually want to see a minor character. No, I'm only talking 3 lines or something, but I actually want to feel like that situation is alive.
Yeah, I do that a lot.
You know, in a way that silent extras annoy me. They actually irritate me.
And if you're having trouble telling them apart, or if it's just muddying the scene, then you're not writing them right. So you get it right in draft 7, 8, 9, 50. You know?
I think with big worlds, like historical worlds are a bit like Star Wars where they're just big. You want to give that texture. Like you want to feel like you've been sucked into another time and place. And sorry to bring the Queen back into it, but I've been watching The Crown.
Never apologise for bringing the Queen back into this podcast.
I think that TV show does historical detail so well. Like this idea of like if they're on the yacht, the royal yacht, you get a sense of the scale of it, of the characters involved, of the servants, of the captain. Like even if, and I think Clint Eastwood said this when he casts extras, he casts real people and he tries to cast interesting faces so that even if they never speak, you get a sense of them as a character.
There's a story
that's
there.
right. And Deadwood was great for that too.
Yeah, and that's the difference between, I think, really high quality work and something like, not to besmirch it, but like a Hallmark movie or a soapy where it's doing something different. So you can have books where you have fewer characters, less speaking roles, but it's doing something different. You're supposed to be tightly focused on this other thing. Whereas I think some things like historical fiction or some fantasy, like Lord of the Rings would be a good example of just having lots of interesting things to people to engage with.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Side characters, even side things that you
Little
kind of dip
jokes.
into for a little while, a sense of a bigger world. I mean,
I like to bring my characters back too. So in that 4-book series they just released, you can see these little bit characters turn up in maybe 2 or 3 books in the background in different places.
See, that's cool. I like
I
that
love
stuff.
that too. In my Books That Changed and Books of the Cataclysm series, there were always characters recurring for a reason, not gratuitously, a la Star Wars sometimes. But I think we've created a cast of amazing characters. Why not use them if there's a role for them? Let me ask you guys a question. Do you ever put people from the real world in your stories? So family members, friends, complete strangers, reviewers who've slighted you,
I put jokes
colleagues.
in. I put jokes that only people like my partner or friends would get. And then I can tell when they've read it because I'll get the texts.
You're right.
Yeah.
Well, the play I'm writing now, there is a character that is, it's not my mother, but there are qualities of my mother in this character, and it's written very lovingly, but also there are a couple of lines that only probably my parents would get and go, yeah, we know what that means. We know what that refers to. I mean, it makes sense anyway, but if you have that extra insight, you go, yeah, I know what you're referring to there.
But not characters whole.
But not whole, complete people, no.
Have I talked? I can't remember if I've talked about this here or just with you guys, but about my second book in the Cowboy series being kind of about my partner and step parenting. Have I talked about that?
No, you haven't.
Oh, right.
This
So
is
it's a cowboy book, and it's not any of them. Like, it's about this woman who advertises for a mail order husband because she's got 5 kids and she thinks she's widowed, and she needs to get west, and so she advertises for this guy, and this younger guy who's lived in the woods his whole life, has never had any experience with children, gets kind of entangled with her. And it really was, even though it's this wacky cowboy story where all this crazy shit happens to them as they go west, it's actually a book, and I didn't realise this until after I'd written. It's a book about my partner and my kids. So they were 5 and 7 when we got together, and he's basically kind of raised them, and he's a lot younger than me, and he'd never had any experience with children, and it's kind of a love letter to the fact, and Sean, you're a step parent, you know this, it's a love letter to that relationship and how it's an act of love on both of their parts to be in a relationship with each other. Like, it's an act of love on Jono's part to love them, and it's an act of love towards me. So it was really kind of recognition of how loved I felt, the fact that they would all build a relationship with each other when they didn't have to, and to get closer and to recognise also their daily life together, what that looks like.
This is definitely a topic for a podcast, how real life stories, really serious matters creep into our novels without
and it's
even
comedy,
noticing.
But he read it recently, and it was really nice to have him read it.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, so one day the kids will read it when they're maybe they might be too embarrassed to read my work.
We haven't even talked about the joy of writing villains. Maybe we'll talk about stereotypical characters another time, because sadly we are coming to the wind down of our episode, and there's a question I would like to ask you before we move on, which has nothing to do with characters really, but I just want to know what you're reading. You know, we've talked in previous episodes about what projects we've got coming up and what environments we like to work in. What are we reading at the moment?
Do you really want to know? Impossible Music.
I swear I didn't ask that. No, I did actually know, but I forgot.
And also I've got The Book of Dust. I forget what the second one's called, but I've got that waiting to read.
The Philip Pullman series. Are you enjoying it so far?
Not as much as the original trilogy, mainly because you know where it's going. Although this second one is kind of weirdly a sequel, so this one's a bit different. But the first one I wasn't as keen on. But you know, as world building's beautiful, and the other one I've got lying around is the next Girl with the Dragon Tattoo novel. I can't remember what to now. The Girl with Something.
The Girl with Another Tattoo.
The Girl with Another Tattoo.
The pony tattoo.
I'm going to try and, because what I often do is read 3 novels at once. This I'm going to try and separate them, because otherwise I'm going to have Simon Rain, on the back of a motorbike with his demon on his shoulder.
Sounds great. I love that idea. Amy, what are you reading?
I'm trying to come up with book outlines, so I'm reading non-fiction. I tend to read non-fiction when I'm writing, and I'm reading Malcolm Gladwell's new book, and I can't remember the name, but it's the one about strangers, and it's a kind of look. I don't know if anyone's read Malcolm Gladwell, but he's amazing. What he does is he takes an idea and turns it around and looks at it from lots of angles, and so you kind of see it in a way you've never seen it before. So do you remember a while ago there was a case in the US, during the Black Lives Matter, the real furor, when a woman was pulled aside and asked to get out of the car, and she hadn't done anything wrong. She was a university professor, and she ended up getting shot and killed just for not getting out of the car.
It's terrible.
And she filmed the whole thing. And it's about that interaction, and he wants to look at where strangers misunderstand each other. So he goes through all the different ways that humans misread, misunderstand, and about our flaws in thinking, about how we are have certain biases towards truth and how that works psychologically. It's a really interesting book. I'm
That
loving
sounds
it.
fascinating.
Yeah, it's really good.
It does. It sounds deeply challenging and
It's a great book.
thought-provoking. I'm reading an Agatha Christie novel.
There's nothing wrong with Agatha
No,
Christie.
I love Agatha Christie. It's the Sittaford mystery. I'm listening to a podcast called She Done It, which is all about Golden Age crime, particularly that written
cool.
by women, and it's been so fantastic. the episode I was listening to last week was all about seances in Golden Age crime, and I'd never read Agatha Christie's The Sittaford Mysteries, so I'll save that for maybe the flight to Dublin, which I've got coming up. So
How long's that flight?
26 hours or something
Oh,
like
it's
that.
gonna
I
take
just
the whole
go
library.
I know, that's what my Kindle is for. What I'll probably do is what I usually do on planes is go, I'll just read a Jack Reacher novel, and then I'll have read 5 by the time I land. Haven't got any sleep. And,
Dad would be very proud of you, Sean.
I've read them all, and I've read them all many times. I always love going back to those books. They're great comfort food. He's a good character, is Jack Reacher, I would
Can
say.
we do that? Talk about comfort food books?
Yeah.
What we read for comfort?
Books that you eat.
Yeah.
Books that you eat.
Yeah. Book
Chocolate, yes. Listeners, if you would like to send us your book chocolate recommendations, I think that we would love to hear it.
I could use some book recommendations.
You'll be able to find all our social details up on our website. Please do feel free to get in touch. We'd love to talk to you too. Thanks, Amy. Thanks, Alex.
Happy writing.
Do you see the sincerity there?
We do mean it, though.
Yeah,
Writing
happy
should be
writing.
happy.
Enjoy your reading.
I hope you find Harry.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Why don't you write when you don't need money? All your notes sound alike too much. All of them start with I love you, honey, but they end with the same old touch. Just for a change, send a nice loving letter and cut out that please remit. Why don't you write when you don't need money, honey? That would certainly make a hit.
So good. Okay. Sorry.
Oh, God.